thing that's saving. It's not the rope, and it's not my holding on to it. To say that the rope saves you or that you're holding the rope saves you, ridiculous. It's he who saves us. But he says, grab hold of this and hold on till I get you safe. I don't like using the word safe until I'm in heaven. When I'm there on those golden streets, I'll shout, I'm safe! I'll even be prepared to say I'm saved. At last. Saved at last. He has continued and completed the good work he began in me. But all through the Bible, there is this emphasis on go on believing, go on trusting, go on holding the rope until you're there. Now, I hope that may have helped some of you. It's probably upset others of you. It's a big issue, and I just want to be both a Calvinist and an Arminian. I want to be both. In fact, somebody came and listened to me for 3 months and said, David, are you a Calvinist or an Arminian? I said, well, you've heard me for 3 months. You should know by now. He said, well, that's what puzzles me. He said, some Sundays I go home and think he's a good Calvinist, and then the very next Sunday you preach an Arminian sermon. Predestination and free will, the old issue. I said, well, you know the answer. He said, I don't. Which are you? I said, you do know. I'm both. Oh, he said, you can't be. I said, not intellectually I can't be. I can't get it together intellectually. But I said, I know that both are true. And both sides would like to rewrite some of the New Testament. Both sides have what they call problem passages. But I believe he's able to keep. And I believe I must keep myself in his love. That I must hold on till I make it. And Hebrews is the one book that I don't think we can twist on this one and say it's just full of problems. It's not. It's full of clear statements that we need to hear, and especially if we're thinking for our own safety or even the safety of our children, that we're going to slip out of this difficult situation and thereby deny Jesus. Jesus did say to believers, to his disciples, if you deny me before men, I'll have to deny you before my Father. But you endure, and you share my glory. Now that's the straight, plain, simple truth. So be overcomers, and then your names will never be blotted out of the Lamb's Book of Life. When the book is opened, there your name will be. He's mine. He never denied me. So I own him now, says Jesus. Well, what are the conclusions? It means, number 4, that holiness is as necessary as forgiveness. Once again, it's not just those who accept the forgiveness of God who make it, but those who press on for holiness. And it is in Hebrews that we have this single verse, make every effort after that holiness without which no man will see the Lord. And far too many want forgiveness, but not holiness. You know, I find people today want happiness from Jesus in this life and holiness in the next. Whereas the will of God in my New Testament is clearly holiness in this life, even if it makes you unhappy, but happiness in the next. But we want it the other way round. Our hedonist generation just wants pleasure, not pain. God is prepared to chastise us, to cause us pain, says Hebrews 12, if that'll make us more holy. The one thing he's after is our holiness. And he can make it tough for his children. But Hebrews even goes so far as to say, if you've never been chastised by the Lord, you're a bastard, you're not a true son. Because if he's your father, he spanks you. Because he wants you to be a good boy, a good girl. So there's a great emphasis in Hebrews on holiness. Now the full gospel is, you don't get forgiveness and then you have to produce holiness. It is that forgiveness and holiness are both gifts of grace. They're both offered on the same basis, faith. But you need both. And the parable which Jesus told, brings it home so clearly, is the parable of a king giving a wedding feast for his son. Now that parable occurs in Luke and Matthew, but in Luke it is purely an invitation to come to the wedding or to the feast. A man gives a feast and then the invited guests make excuses. So the master of the feast says to his servants, go into the highways and byways and bring as many in as you can, my house will be full. And that's where the story stops in Luke, because Luke is writing for unbelievers. And what they need to hear is the gospel invitation, come, for all things are now ready. But in Matthew, which is written for believers, the story does not stop there. It goes on. and the time for the wedding feast for the king's son comes, and the guests who've responded to the invitation arrive, and a man comes in without wedding clothes. And the king, in a very friendly way, says, "Friend, why didn't you change your clothes for my son's wedding?" And it says the man was speechless, which means he could have done so. But he turned up in his old dirty clothes for the king's son's wedding. And the king was angry. "You accepted my invitation, but you didn't bother to change your old clothes." He said, "Tie him hand and foot so he can't ever get in here again, and throw him into the outer darkness, and there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Now, that's a pretty tough ending to the story. You see, when you talk to sinners, you say the invitation has come. You can have a place at the feast. But when you're talking to those who've accepted the invitation, you say, "Now get your clothes changed." It will be as much of an insult to the king that you don't bother to change your way of life, your lifestyle, as it would be if you'd made an excuse and not come at all. Do you follow? What a message for sanctification. And we need to preach Matthew and that version to Christians. Not to unbelievers. To unbelievers, the invitation is, "Come. There's a place for you at the feast." But to believers who are coming, we say, "Change your clothes. Put on the white linen, which is the righteous deeds of the saints. Follow after holiness." You've sung it. "There is a green hill far away." There's one verse in that says, "He died that you might be forgiven. He died to make you good, that you might go at last to heaven, saved by his precious blood." Jesus didn't just die to get your forgiveness, he died to get your holiness. And it cost him his blood to get you cleaned up and get you ready for heaven. Now it's those who press on, those who keep looking to Jesus, who say, "I've got a race to run, and I'm going for the finishing line and the prize." They are the ones Jesus is looking for. Which means, of course, number 5, that God is a holy God. We forget that. You know, I've had about 5 BBC radio interviews on my book since it came out on Friday on local radio. And every time they've asked the same question: how can a loving God send anyone to hell? Nobody ever asks, how can a holy God send anyone to hell? Yet God is holy. His love is holy love, which means he will never be content with less than holiness for the ones he loves. Aren't you glad about that? All right, what value has it for believers? And then I'm going to go to the 2 charts that one of you has prepared for me. Thank you very much for doing it. Where are you? Thank you very much. They're fine. Well, for Christians, what is the value of Hebrews? Number 1, it helps us in Bible study by telling us the relationship between the Old and the New Testament. That shadow concept is most helpful to understand the Old Testament. Number 2, it is Christ-centered, and if there's one thing Hebrews does for you, it keeps your eyes fixed on Jesus. He does that all the way through. He doesn't just tell you to, he just talks about Jesus all the way. Thirdly, it's a very faith-building kind of book, because it inspires you when you look at all the people in the stadium watching us. You really want to go for it and be believing when you die. There was a Christian man in Beaconsfield. When he was dying, he called all his relatives to come and stay, and he invited them in these terms. He wrote to each one of them a personal letter and said, "Come and see how a Christian dies." What an invitation. See, Christianity is a way of death as well as a way of life. And he was believing to the end. Fourthly, it's a book that warns us of the dangers of backsliding. And fifthly, it's a book that emphasizes being an active member of the church, of following leaders, cooperating with leaders, and of not neglecting the meeting together. It stresses that safety lies in fellowship when you're under pressure. The devil will pick off Christians on their own. So when the pressure's on, stay close in the family. Don't neglect your links with the Church of Christ. Be much stronger was that. Now let's look at those. They're rather complicated. Wow. They're really quite simple, but I just wanted to take two sections of the book of Hebrews and just give you a little feel of the shape of them.